Welcome, everyone. This is the class Giving Voice to the Rights of Nature. I'd like to thank Kellogg Hubbard Library, Poem City, and Orca Media for being here and allowing this presentation to happen. My name is Jessie Lavasco, and I am a poet and artist. And since the inception of Poem City, I've been involved either as a reader or doing a class or in some way. And I'm always excited about this event. It gets me very excited to come back to Vermont because I moved to Michigan 8 years ago now, and I do half and half. I live half the year in Michigan and spend a good amount of time here, the other half. So I wanted to give a land acknowledgement for the Abenaki people. We acknowledge that we reside upon the traditional and unceded home of the Western Abenaki people. These lands and waters have been a site of meeting and ways of life among Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. This day at Kellogg Hubbard Library, we honor, recognize, and respect the Abenaki as the traditional stewards of this land. We strive to respect and protect this land while continually honoring the legacy of Vermont's Indigenous people, the Abenaki people of the Dawn. So, there's so much going on in the world, so many levels of tearing down, breaking apart, things that are really hard. And we as writers and artists have a tool that we can use to help inform, inspire. And so the impetus of this class began when I happened to hear Robin Wall Kimmerer at the University of Oregon Spring Creek Nature Writing Talk. She had something to say that really affected me. Now, I don't know if you've read her books before, Braiding Sweetgrass and Serviceberry, both of them. This one is incredible. I mean, she definitely brings her science, her indigenous wisdom, and her plant knowledge together. And she is very informed and a wonderful teacher. One of the things she said, and it really opened up my eyes, was we can change anything with the power of writing. And that took me on this branching out, finding other authors that support that. And I spent the winter kind of just finding ways to bring artists and writers closer to their art and their talent. So I'm going to start with a moment of silence in gratitude to see ourselves as the great green we, and these are her words, remembering that we are nature. Robin asks, if we speak of ourselves as poets or nature writers, where is the boundary between writer and nature? Boundary is blurred. Does it ever occur to us that when we write about the white pine, that the white pine could be the writer? Does white pine or any aspect of nature inspire you to write as you walk in natural settings in the forest or even on the roads? I've had 2 fellowship opportunities to spend periods of time in forest ecosystems to write. One was an ecological art fellowship with the organization United Plant Savers in Rutland, Ohio for 6 days in 2019, and the other as a fellow for the Writing the Land project, in which I observed and listened within the East Montpelier trails for 4 seasons in 2021. And in both of those experiences, I was definitely drawn to a certain plant or a tree or a flower, and that was what I would write about in a poem. One of the poems I wrote was called White Pine. There is great loss in the death of trees one comes to know. Pines that stand along a path upright like sentinels, evoke a deeper quiet. When lifted from earth, they uproot a village. Their dried needles saved me once when I needed fire. Wispy, pointed fingers, a prominent catalyst of flame. Many years they've lived among hemlocks, beech, and birch. Today, while walking through woods, so many have fallen, splintered, still green, spread over the ground in large sheaves. Spring storms and vicious winds have taken them down. I hear them moaning. Robin asked the question, what is the role of a nature writer? And it is our role to illuminate the lives of plants and animals, illuminate another world view, inspired by their intelligence, not ours. To illuminate the intelligence of other species as if they are deer people, pine people, aspen people. Land is our teacher. How many feel that way already? Yeah, I've got, yes, good. Nature can move us, inspire us to write their stories to our human world, writing many ways of being through our voices. I'm going to ask Mary Elder Jacobson, to come up and read from her book, Stone Chat, the poem I Caddisfly, and a poem I wrote called Call of the Loon. And then Andrea Gould, is going to read Ash Tree Awakens. And all of these poems are from the voice of the nature being, whatever comes from that being speaking through the writer. Okay. You want to come up? Yeah, I'll switch you up.
Is there enough room? There's some cordage going on here.
I know.
Hi, everybody. Doesn't matter what order.
No.
So this is Jessie's book, Native, and she's asked me to read Call of the Loons, and it has an epigraph at the beginning. Is this Eric Hansen?
Yes.
I think I have saved this article for years, maybe, that this is from. Eric Hansen is our sort of expert loon biologist in Vermont, among many other things. And this is a quote from his Vermont Loon Recovery Project. The epigraph: a loon sings its predecessor's call. A loon moving from one lake to another will change its call to match that of its new home. The landscape sings through the loon. The loon is the mouthpiece of the lake. That is prose, but it's poetry itself, right? Call of the Loons. As we inhabit each pond and lake, we listen, hear the original score of landscape and water emanating from groves of trees, seeping through ancient feathers and bones, a call we instinctually decode, one that hails from our throats, pierces the stars with our red eyes, haunts the night with our ebony heads. Each yodel, tremolo, and wail belong to no other. We hold a terroir of instinctual sound. It drops from our tongues like rain. Beautiful, Jessie. That's Jessie's poem. My poem is called I Caddisfly, and it's from the point of view of a caddisfly. Do you all know what a caddisfly is? Okay, good. I thought today, just like a little change of pace, because I've read this poem before, but I just brought along my, Insects and Spiders book just to read this one description. So first, when I write, I usually am observing something, and then I write and draft, and then I might go look up the facts And when I started this poem, I actually had some things I did not understand what was really going on. But anyway, so the caddisfly, this little description: eggs are deposited singly through surface film at edge of water. Larvae gather fragments of dead leaves and twigs, cement them with salivary silk until their bodies are encased in cylindrical tubes, which they drag everywhere while feeding from the front opening. They molt several times inside tubes, and when fully grown, close tube ends and pupate inside. Adults break through tubes, rise to the water surface, and fly off. So I just have fun sometimes writing from the point of view of something that is totally not me, an animal or other things. I, caddisfly. If you can say a piece of paper is a leaf, or say that pages of a book are leaves, so might I say that paper mache is innately and to wit my woove. So too I say, no mere mud dauber am I, caddisfly, which is to say, the realm I'm in remains upon and under waves, where wavering I weave more bit by bit as artisan, to build my world of spit and leaf from self and lake, whose underwater weeds I moistly masticate as I see fit, which is to say, in truth, into it, and lately mostly lost in all absorption. In fits and in spurts, I hiccup into view these words of me to house the world of I, caddisfly.
Thank you, Mary. Andrea, do you have yours?
This poem, is that good? This poem is also by Jessie Lovasco. Is this in a book, Jessie? Okay, because I had never seen this poem before. It's called Ash Tree Awakens. As winter loosens my limbs, I wake with a pulsing joy and throbbing ache. Blinded by the thick fog in my forest home, I feel something is missing. Stretching the tips of my roots out to touch my kin, but instead there is emptiness amidst disturbed detritus and soil. They are no longer here. During winter's sleep, members of my tribe have been extracted from earth, though strong enough to survive. Death was a measure of prevention for the possibility of an invasive spread. Some still stand in line by the road, painted with a blue stripe, waiting for execution. What will become of us?
Thanks, Andrea. So I want to say something because my poems are being read, and it's not because my poems are better than anyone else's. What I decided to do, because I needed examples, and I needed to use examples that I had already tried out, I decided to just take mine and not go searching for other poets, because I kind of had a limited amount of time to work on the project, and so my poems are what we're using, just to give you examples of the voice of nature working through the poet for those three poems. So thank you, both of you. Andrea, Susie, Mary, and I are all in the same poetry group, and it's like we're family. I could say, can you help me out? Can you read? And they all were very, very willing. So thank you.
We have a missing sister.
And we do have a missing sister. Okay. So. Throughout the class, I'm going to ask you, this is when I'm going to ask you to do a little writing. I'd like you to jot down some one or two elements of nature you'd like to speak for or allow them to speak through you. And maybe write one or two sentences. And I'll give you about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to do that. Because at the end, if we have time to write, we'll fill that out. But I wanted you to have the experience of thinking of a being and then putting your voice through it.
So you want us to do that now?
Yeah.
Can you Yeah, give us the instruction
Yes,
again?
yes. As you heard caddisfly, loon, ash tree, the voice, the writer is speaking,
Yeah.
but the element of nature is speaking through the
But
writer.
what you want us to do right now is think of a couple of things like that.
And then
right
write a
now.
couple sentences,
That was
and then
just-
write a couple sentences, yeah, to start you off. do one more minute. Okay. So save that for at the end of the class if we have time and you want to expand on that. And so I'm going to begin again with the most important thing we can do as human beings and writers is to pay attention. Children are so good at paying attention. They see everything. They are inquisitive and want to know the why of all that they see. But it's a fact that in the U.S. children recognize most corporate logos and do not recognize plants that live in their surroundings. How can we inspire them to see things differently? This is a book that was gifted to me by Susie, which is written by Robert McFarlane and illustrated by Jackie Morris. And they uncover the lost words in the lives of children today. When the most recent edition of the Oxford Junior Dictionary, widely used in schools around the world, was published, a reader soon noticed that 40 common words concerning nature had been dropped. The words were no longer being used enough by children to merit their place in the dictionary. Among the words taking their place in the dictionary were blog, broadband, bullet point, cut and paste, and voicemail. I know. Just gonna write there. These are some of the words that are seldom or never heard anymore. Magpie. Conquer. Willow. Weasel. Most of us sitting here do know those words, do still have that nature surrounding us in Vermont, where we're very fortunate, but many children do not and never hear those words or see any of that. They don't see the willow, they don't see the weasel, so they don't know. One of the ways that Robert McFarlane, or the way he writes a poem in the book, all the poems are written in acrostics, so that means they're vertical. So you would take the word of your being, of your animal, of your tree, and you would write it this way, and then each sentence starts with a letter. And I'm going to read this poem to you. Weasel whirls through world like wildfire, embers spin, smoke curls, for weasel acts on land like spark on tinder. Scorches grass, turns field to pyre, sand to glass, tree to cinder, eats air, burns shadow, lights the sky, hot wires the sun with its speed, its dance, its gyres. And what I was hoping is that maybe you take one of the nature beings you thought of already or a new one, and just write it vertically, a word vertically, so that you can be prepared to write a poem at the end or when you go home, an acrostic about an animal or a tree or anything, a water creature, a forest creature. Yeah. As Robin continued to point out, there's difficulty when we pay attention. We have to acknowledge the pain. We see the loss of old-growth forests, the degradation of water in our oceans, lakes, and rivers, the loss of species. When we fall in love with the earth, we cannot be bystanders of destruction. Just as we could not be bystanders to our children and our families. We as poets and nature writers are meant to inform. Learning to see is a responsibility. The world has information overload. Information heard on the news or on social media does not change people's minds. Wisdom does. It comes from our lives lived with nature experiences. In our writing, we must come from our stories. We actually have all that we need to protect the earth, but as a people, we're paralyzed. What is the work we must do? What is the work of the nature writer and poet? We seem to be trapped in an old story. The power of language will help us write a new story. Language of the land is sacred. It's the right of the nature writer to speak of land as familiar, as community, to illuminate the multiple ways of knowing, to reclaim a just relationship. One of the roles of the poet or nature writer is how to find a new language that inspires a means to heal the earth. So just the two exercises we did with speaking through the voice, doing an acrostic, and I have several others we're going to do too. Finding new ways to speak, to awaken, to shift the thinking, to make our poems and our writings be less familiar and less common, so that we change the brain, we change the thinking, and our wisdom is what then gets taken in. It has been found that indigenous cultures are not experiencing the same devastation of, an interesting finding in the United Nations report catastrophic decline in biodiversity. But there are places on the planet where that's not happening. It has been found that indigenous cultures are not experiencing the same devastation. 80% of remaining biodiversity is in indigenous places. And then this is the great thing. Biodiversity areas also have language diversity because they're exposed to so much. It is up to the poet and nature writer to create a language that speaks for the earth and her inhabitants.
There it is, landmarks. Oh, I was thinking so.
Katie Holton wrote a book called The Language of Trees, a rewilding of literature and landscape. And it's so beautiful. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but she uses her illustrations throughout, which are an alphabet of trees. Mm-hmm. So she takes, for instance, these are the trees she chose to represent each letter, and then she transforms them to the alphabet. And so if you see the word language, it's linden tree, apple, nannyberry, ginkgo, umbrella, apple again, ginkgo, and elm. And so the whole book is written like this. It's beautiful. It's like so inspiring, but it brings the reader in. Someone who never goes into nature, walks in a forest, is going to get this sense, a different sense than when they just read a regular poetry book. So using an alphabet of some kind. One of the poems by Sojourner Truth is, I am the seed of the free. I intend to bear great fruit. And then she used the trees for all. Isn't that beautiful?
So is it a collection of poems by other people?
It's an anthology. Thank you for asking. It's an anthology of essays, poems. Some have like a little short memoir or something, of different things that they've experienced. It's a beautiful collection of known and unknown people. Yes. Zadie Smith wrote Birds Singing, the wrong tunes in the wrong trees too early in the year. So, whoops, move that there. I'm going to ask you to use your pen and paper again. Think of a family of things that you could make an alphabet of. And I'm going to give you 2 suggestions, shells or stones. And think about what that would be like to create poetry with an image to go with it. A family of alphabets. Bless you. And you don't have to know the name of every subject in the category that you're choosing, but just to get a sense of what you might look at, and then you could go look up the A to Z of that subject matter. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, is her book, are the trees, do the trees start with the letter of the alphabet that they
Yes.
represent?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Apple, beach. I can read through the ABCs if you want, or at least a couple of them. Oh, here it is. Right, like A, B, C, D, E is the same as this. It's apple, and then B for beach, C for cedar, D for dogwood, E for elm, see? And it just goes like that. Herbs would be great for that, Okay. Did everyone get enough time for that? Okay. So I was very impressed with this part of Robin's talk, and I knew I couldn't say it as well as she did, because she's coming from her native indigenous wisdom, and I would like her to share another tool that we can use in our writing, that she's actually asking us to use.
Well, so I want to think together about the role of nature writing in helping us to find a new language. How can indigenous languages and worldview contribute to the healing of the earth? Just as we have deep regard and practical reverence for old-growth forests, can we bring our minds together as well around the sanctity, the protection and flourishing of old-growth cultures? And to think about the generativity, the learning that can come from two-eyed seeing of understanding the world through multiple ways of knowing. There's so much guidance in indigenous language about how we might go forward together. Here's just one tiny example. Look at this beautiful word. The word for tree in my language literally means landholder. Do you suppose that we would be clear cutting on steep slopes if we said we're going to go out and murder the landholders? These are powerful formulas for thinking differently about our relationship to the land. And replacement of language didn't just occur in the Indian boarding schools. It occurred through so many different venues of erase and replace, which is known as linguistic imperialism. The erasure of the original language of a place and the imposition of the colonizer language. It continues to be a tool of colonization today all around the world, contributing to the extinction of languages everywhere. And one of the most, I find, pernicious examples of linguistic imperialism is this little tiny word here. It, right? Well, you think, well, it's just a little pronoun. How bad could that be? But when we look at our relatives here, when we look at the salamanders and the robins and the strawberries, in English, can we agree that if we don't know their name, and by and large we don't, we just call them it? It is singing, it is growing, right? And we don't think twice about this. But let's stop for a second, because how many times do you say this every day? Itting the natural world. What does that mean, to it the natural world? What if my grandma came here on stage to bring me a drink of water and I said, it has its apron on? What just happened there, right? I made her into a thing. My beloved grandmother I reduced to nothing. I stole her humanity. I degraded her by calling her it. We all agree that we don't do that, right? Do we call members of our own family it? Do we call members of our own species it? We do not. And yet, we speak of the living world freely with this pronoun of objectification. It makes me think there is, it's no coincidence that English is the language of global capitalism and commerce, because doesn't itting the world, objectifying the world, make it more easy? It gives us permission to turn earthly gifts into commodities and into natural resources. I think this is a very dangerous word. We are in a time of developing new languages, new pronouns, for example, all around us. And I think it's time that we do exactly that. In indigenous ways of knowing, in learning my Potawatomi language, it's very difficult to learn because we speak a grammar of animacy, as been referred to. It's not only could I never say it about my grandmother, I could never say it about this monarch butterfly or these goldenrods and asters. It's impossible in our language to speak of the living world as object. We use the same grammar for everyone in the living world as we do for our family, because it's our family. This is the kinship worldview, isn't it? where we have to think very carefully about how it is that we consume and take from the earth, because these are our relatives, not objects and not commodities. And you know, as a scientist, it gives me pain in having to write scientific articles about plants who have been my teachers for decades. Everything I've learned about them, and I have to call them it on the page, it's so disrespectful. And so I began thinking about how could we decolonize our language to come up with new pronouns for the living world. A modest proposal. You know, I always hated diagramming sentences and learning grammar in school, as my editors will attest. But I like to think about these pronouns as the pronouns of the revolution. And I want to share with you why. I worked with my language teacher to say, could we, inspired by the animacy in our language, that when we do have objective language as well, there are things that deserve to be its, and in our language we have inanimate cases to talk about pencils and bulldozers and things like that. But there is a different verb to hear a blue jay and an airplane, because one is animate and one is inanimate, always giving respect to the personhood of all beings. And so my teacher, the late Stuart King Bunn, helped me with this project. I said, Stuart, isn't there a word just that means there's a being? Doesn't matter whether you're a he or a she. You're just a being. You're a member of the family of life. And he worked with me on this. And it turns out that in our language, he said, I think we would say that B'madiziyaki, an earth being, someone who lives here with us, here all together. I had no illusions that B'madiziyaki was going to slide into English anytime soon. But you know, the last part of that word is aki, which means the land, which means earth. And that little phoneme at the end, ki, is largely unclaimed in the English language. And so we proposed in our modest proposal that in order to speak respectfully and lovingly of other beings, we could say ki. In this case, our ki is eating berries. Ki is growing in the forest clearing, not it, but you who are an earthly relative, someone else who is living here on the earth. And my students have been playing with this in writing and in daily practice. And of course, they say they stumble just a little bit over this. But as they said, it makes us happy. And you know, if we're going to go around inventing pronouns, we're going to have some kind of grammar here, some rules. And of course, we're going to need a plural. We'll need to speak of all those bears and all those berries. And within the Potawatomi language, one of the ways that we can pluralize things is to add an N. Thank you. Oh my gosh, indeed. We already have the word, don't we? We already have the word, the plural of geese, so that when those geese are flying south for the winter, we can say, our kin are going on vacation. Have a good time, come back soon. We're going to miss you. I don't think we need any more words to isolate us from the living world, to convert the living world to natural resources. But this is a way in which language can transform our relationship to land and to invite us into a worldview of kinship. I urge you to practice, try it out. And you know, so often in an audience like this, and I'll wait for it tonight, somebody will come up to me and say, you know what ki means in our language? I've heard it means my mother. I've heard it means a tree. Last night, two wonderful Dene women came and told me it means my relative. There's some power in this word. And the notions that underlie that word is the personhood of all beings, that everyone is a person. not an object. And this is not only a linguistic development, but it is a legal development. It is a part of environmental justice around the world. You are looking in this photograph at the Wanganui River, the sacred river of the Maori in Aotearoa. And for years, Maori leaders have agitated for the recognition of the intrinsic rights of...
Okay. There we go. I don't want to mess that first word up. Bamadaziaki. And from that, we get a ki, an earth being, ki, a pronoun replacing it, and kin, earth beings, plural. I'm going to ask Susie Atwood to come up and read 2 poems to give you an example of what that would be like to insert ki instead of it.
Right. This is my assignment. However, I did not write these. Our beloved Jessie wrote these. And she sent me these poems beforehand to take a look at, and I sent her a text back, and I was like, what's ki, and how do I pronounce it? So I'm a little more enlightened in this moment, because this was the first time I've heard this. The first one is called Red Fox. Red Fox had whisked through the grove of hemlock trees in a forest, silent as a spy, whisked over snow like the wind. Red Fox was a streak of pumpkin orange, though something like a ghost. Did I really see ki? As I approached the place where Fox crossed the path, tracks were fresh and fast against white. This glimpse of movement left glowing embers of memory, dwelling like a star in the cosmos, a light in the story on this path. Did I really see ki? Second one is Junco. Junco's flitter of white feathers arriving on my mother's Japanese maple caught my attention. Ki was seeking a birdseed bell my sister gave her for Christmas. Finding that bird kin had eaten every last seed, Ki sat on a branch as if resting chair, so small and solemn upon cold snow. Junco has not appeared here before. Ki's arrival is a mystery, perhaps a message. Did other birds spread the word about the seed bell? Ki comes this day as I ponder questions of purpose, why I spend time at all in the tall grass of imagination, like Junco, who lives in the foliage of the forest floor, and how venturing into unfamiliar places brings surprises, awakens seeds that have long been sleeping. Makes so much more sense.
So, I'm going to give you a little time to write 2 sentences using the word ki. See what it feels like. Just see what it feels like. It might not speak to you at all, and it might be a neat way to kind of write differently with a different pronoun for it.
I love that tall grass of the imagination, I just have to say.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. going to say one more minute. Okay. We can definitely use the time at the end to write more if you'd like. We'll see how it goes. So, language can transform the world. And we as writers and poets have this opportunity to say things in a different way, to awaken people to say it differently, not to hold on to cliches, to find new ways of being artistic. Robert McFarlane, in his book Landmarks, have any of you read this? This was a gift from Andrea. You gave this to me. Yeah, yes, you did. Yes, these gifts that I have. Thank you. Robert McFarlane goes all over the world studying languages and collecting words. And the thing about what he finds in all these different cultures is that description goes so much deeper than it does in the English language, so much deeper. Richard Skelton, a keeper of lost words that he quotes in his book, says, "A hint at a way of looking at the world that is now also lost, an attention to the form of things and a care, a generosity in the bestowing of names. Brog is not simply a branch, but a broken branch." So there's a word for a broken branch. "Lum is not just a pool, but a deep pool. Each word has its own feel on the tongue, its own sound, and inherent poetry. Moreover, each word tells us something subtly different about its referent and our attitudes to it. Could these old forms vivify and invigorate contemporary language by virtue of their difference, their strangeness?" Another thing that happens is that some of these words, and you might see these in some poems, where words are actually made up by the way someone feels something. Well, the way language started with indigenous people is through sound, how they hear it and how they interpret it. So coming up with your own language is another thing that you can do. I'm going to read a couple quotes from the book itself. "Language is fossil poetry," wrote Ralph Waldo Emerson in 1844. "As the limestone of the continent consists of infinite masses of the shells of animalcules, so language is made up of images or tropes, which now in their secondary use have long ceased to remind us of their poetic origin." Emerson, as essayist, sought to reverse this petrification and restore the poetic origin of words, thereby revealing the originary role of nature in language. Considering the verb to consider, he reminds us that it comes from the Latin considiare, and thus carries a meaning of to study or see the stars. Etymology illuminates. A mundane verb is suddenly starlit. And one other little excerpt I'm going to take. "It is not on the whole that natural phenomena and entities themselves are disappearing, rather than that there are fewer people able to name them. and that once they go unnamed, they go to some degree unseen. Language deficit leads to attention deficit. As we further deplete our ability to name, describe, and figure particular aspects of our places, our competence for understanding and imagining possible relationships with non-human nature is correspondingly depleted. Tim D. neatly puts it, without a name made in our mouths, an animal or a place struggles to find purchase in our minds and hearts. It's a fascinating book. I have a handout for all of you regarding this book, and also the back is going to be a poem that Andrea is going to read, and you can read along with her because you can show. Oh, okay, if you want to, I have a lot. Okay, very good. Did you get one? Okay. Andrea, would you like to read? This is using like. Yep. This is using made-up language.
Exilic sky. Outside in the exilic, ice blue, thin air sky, the wind blows cold. Ice is crunching crystals into the north corner of the lake. No more blue, only stillness, shimmer. Where is eagle? Now that fish are trapped below the thunder, the thick ice. Waves have no voice, no rising splash. Just before the freeze, they looked like dolphins, do lumping, undulating movement in thick water until they too were frozen. Did you intend for me? I didn't ask you to read what was in parentheses. Was that part of the poem?
It's showing you. You could read it without too, if you'd like to
'Cause-
try it without it and see what. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
Now
it
that they're reading it and can see it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
read it again.
Yeah. Okay.
without it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Exilic sky. Outside in the exilic sky, the winds blow cold. Ice is crunching crystals into the north corner of the lake. No more blue, only stillness, shimmer. Where is eagle? Now that fish are trapped below the thunder. Waves have no voice, no rising splash. Just before the freeze, they look like dolphins do lumping in thick water until they too were frozen.
Thank you, Andrea.
I love Thunter.
I like to lumping.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really did a great job on that one because it's hard when there's different words you've never, So, you know what I'm going to say. Try making up some words about something. That just, your winter that you had, or the spring that's coming. Something in a couple sentences that describe how cold you got.
This is a lot of fun.
Let's do one more minute on that. How was that? Was that the most challenging? It was fun?
Yeah, that was fun.
Good, good, good.
I found that I was also just using regular words as different kinds of verbs and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Could you give an example?
I could just read you what I wrote. Terrid clouds skintered aloft, the tick-click of bare branches as the fleeters roughed through the windy panic and fell hard on frigged ground, lofting until.
Did you define them all? Have you defined them?
Sure. Terrid clouds, sort of like terrifying or torrid or something. Skintered
Well, Skinner is
speaks
obvious.
for itself.
Yes.
Off the tick-click of bare branches
I like to click.
as the fleeters roughed through the windy panic.
You wrote the poem. She gave us a definition. I think it's interesting to hear what the actual definition is. I mean, it's more fun to read the whole thing.
Oh, I
and-
thought I was
and
just
see what
supposed to
you think
write,
about it.
make up words, and in like a poetic way.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we were making up words in a poetic way. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. What did you do? Did you do?
I define them.
Oh, you defined it,
I'd like to
okay.
hear that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
No, that part I did not write a poem about. So junkling is lumbering along with boots on.
Oh, good.
Squidgy is jittery, anticipating, it's an anticipating feeling between fear and excitement. And freedgess is the struggle to free oneself from old reactions, but still caught in self-doubt or hesitation.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. I love how everyone saw it differently. No, it's really great. There isn't just a right way of doing it, so that
Which one did you ask us to do?
I really, I mean, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I was just saying, takes,
Yeah.
Wondering what the prompt was that we went off in different directions.
okay, the prompt was to experience what it's like to describe in words that aren't, that you make up,
Mhm.
you know?
And
So.
I heard make-up words.
Yeah, and make-up words
That's,
is a huge portion of it, yes,
that's what I
yes.
heard, but it was natural things.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Did you make something up?
Maybe we should all share these right now.
okay.
Not like everybody's jonesing.
Yeah.
I know, everyone's funny to
Should I
hear.
go ahead?
Go ahead, Mac.
Okay, phrase, pattern of ice crystals from where water receded. Harng, Harng, an eruption of flying insects.
Wow.
Goosh, collection of moss mounds growing. And floof, remains of feathers from a predated bird. Like on the ground.
Awesome.
As opposed to fluff.
And then there's two other words, but I couldn't figure out what they were, what they meant.
Awesome. That's,
Carned and kloop.
that's something you can do at home now, or later if you want
Did you
to.
all find, I found, might think of something, but I thought, no, I'm thinking too much of a word that kind of is, and then I would try to make myself
Yeah.
go somewhere else.
Do you want to share yours?
Sure, and then at the end, I had to go back and use a key
Oh,
in the,
oh,
so I
that's,
kind of did a, I don't know.
use several of the
four-line
tools.
poem-y thing with my made-up words in it, and then I used the key. Halfway through the wood pile, keys, that's possessive. K-I apostrophe S. Halfway through the wood pile, keys, sloughed snakeskin, girdlings to a log. Into the firebox it goes, soft, it alights fast as paper birch with the same orange frosh.
It's a poem. It's a poem, already done. Anyone else? No.
You sure? Come on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That was fun. Andrea, did you want to share any?
I can.
Okay.
Swarping from lilac limb to lilac limb, a pair of mourning doves and a pair of ravens scrimble along on thin legs, swoop around mud and leaf litter, kin to each other, kin to me, kin to the ancient apple tree, which dangles bird feeders like ancient earrings, precious and revered. I had some more made-up words, but they didn't fit in yet.
Beautiful. Really. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit to the rights of nature. Robin mentioned the personhood of all beings in her talk, and I don't know if you caught that, but I was intrigued by that right away, and I looked into the right of nature and the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights, which she's talking about. It's even, it's fuller than what she mentioned. And I took an online rights of nature law class this winter to see more about what it entailed. And then I just put it back into what it is I do and what it is we do. writing poetry or any kind of writing that speaks about and for the land is an act toward eco-justice. And so when we do this, we are really doing something to defend and protect nature as well as give it the sacred place it needs in our world. Rights of Nature is a movement to create a legal pathway for people to defend and protect ecosystems, waterways, plants, and animals. Rights of Nature law codify nature's right to exist, regenerate, and flourish, giving people and tribes the ability to protect nature in court. A woman named Mari Margul spoke at a Bioneers conference, and she talks about what the Rights of Nature does and is. And I decided to include this in our writing workshop because I think it will inspire us to go forward in any area that we might choose. Like say you're really into the oceans or you're really into the forest and that's where you want to put your attention. It helps you to articulate where it'll inspire you to go forward in that area. So she's going to start with a water crisis in New England, and she's very articulate. She's a great talker. Here we go.
Like Blaine, the town of Barnstead in central New Hampshire is rural and largely conservative. What they faced there wasn't mining of coal, but of water. Companies like Nestle are targeting communities across the country for their water. Just up the road from Barnstead, USA Springs Corporation had set its sights on the town of Nottingham. The company sought a permit from the state to withdraw over 400,000 gallons of water a day to bottle and sell overseas.
We had that right in Montpelier.
I know.
The people of Nottingham had fought for 7 years to stop USA Springs from coming in and privatizing their water. They appealed permits to the State Department of Environmental Services. They circulated petitions. They lobbied their state legislature. They held protests, and they filed lawsuits. They did everything right through conventional environmental organizing, but somehow they still weren't winning. Down the road, at a Barnstead Democracy School, Jack O'Neill, a member of the town select board, asked us why the state environmental agency seemed to him to be more interested in granting corporations permits to take their water than helping people in the community protect it. Turns out, as we cover in the democracy schools, there is a reason why that is. Over 100 years ago, the first regulatory agency, the Interstate Commerce Commission, was created at the request of the railroad corporations, the Walmarts of their day. As the U.S. Attorney General Richard Olney told the president of Burlington Railroad back in 1893, the agency, quote, is or can be made of great help to the railroads. It satisfied the popular clamor for government supervision at the same time that supervision is almost entirely nominal, end quote. He went on to say that the agency acts as, quote, a sort of barrier between the railroad corporations and the people, end quote. As one Barnstead resident put it, it seemed as though nothing had changed in over 100 years. To the folks in Barnstead, it seemed that if they took the path of Nottingham, it was only a matter of time before a corporation came along and took their water. Because of that, Jack O'Neill and the other select board members asked us to draft an ordinance that would ban corporations from coming in and siphoning off their water, and which offered the best and highest protection for their aquifer. They also wanted the ordinances to strip corporations of their ability to override the community's lawmaking. We worked hand in hand with them to draft an ordinance. And like Blaine's, the Barnstead Ordinance recognizes that ecosystems have legally enforceable rights. bans certain corporations from carrying out activities the community doesn't want, and lastly, strips corporations of constitutional protections. Adopting the ordinance at a town meeting by a vote of 135 to 1, Barnstead became the first community in the nation to ban corporations from privatizing their water. Folks still struggling to protect their water in neighboring Nottingham soon called us. They wanted us to draft them an ordinance modeled on Barnstead's. Gail Mills, who with her husband Chris became leaders in the campaign to pass the ordinance, explained their decision to turn their back on the environmental regulatory system that they fought in for so long. She said, quote, "We have to go out and make our own history and not let others define it for us," end quote. In March of last year, the people of Nottingham made history. They voted to adopt the ordinance at their town meeting, banning corporations from privatizing their water, recognizing the inalienable rights of ecosystems, and stripping corporations of constitutional rights. This work is spreading in New England as the threat from Nestle and other corporations grows. Following in the footsteps of Barnstead and Nottingham, the towns of Shapley and Newfield recently became the first communities in Maine to ban corporations from privatizing their water and to recognize the rights of ecosystems. These stories from communities in Pennsylvania, New England, and elsewhere were shared with folks at the nonprofit Pachamama Alliance, which has offices in San Francisco and Ecuador. In 2007, Ecuador began the process of drafting a new constitution. For centuries, the people and landscapes of Ecuador have been exploited by outsiders, and in recent years it was revealed that Texaco had dumped more than 18 billion gallons of toxic wastewater into the Ecuadorian rainforest. The Pachamama Alliance invited us to Ecuador to meet with elected delegates to the Constitutional Assembly. Now, we were not experts in Ecuadorian law, but there are similarities which cut across international lines. There, like here, the law treats nature as property. We told the delegates stories of Blaine and Barnstead and how the people in those communities understood that without fundamentally changing how we treated nature and law, they could not protect it, and how we worked with them to draft and adopt new laws recognizing legally enforceable rights of ecosystems. We also had the opportunity to meet with the President of the Constitutional Assembly, Alberto Acosta. We thought that we'd have an uphill battle, trying to explain to this former Minister of Energy and Mines why communities in the US were adopting laws recognizing ecosystem rights. But before we had a chance to say anything, he told us that to his mind, the law treats nature as a slave with no rights of its own. We have found a meeting of the minds in one of the most unlikely but most critical of places. We were asked to draft language for the delegates, and over a series of months, they shaped and expanded that language. And just over a year ago, the people of Ecuador approved the new constitution, becoming the very first country in the world to recognize in its constitution rights of ecosystems to, quote, exist, persist, regenerate, and evolve, end quote. We're now working with communities from Maine to California, from Virginia to Spokane, Washington. After failing to clean up the Spokane River, one of the most polluted in the nation, folks like Dr. John Osborne, a physician at Spokane's VA hospital, had given up hope that our environmental laws could protect the river. He, with others across the city, have drafted an amendment to the Spokane City Charter which will recognize legally enforceable rights for the Spokane River. And if adopted this November, Spokane will become the first city in the U.S. to recognize rights of nature. In 1973, Professor Christopher Stone penned his famous article, "Should Trees Have Standing?" He explained this idea of rights of nature and why it's so hard for us to think about those without rights, the rightless, as possibly having rights, and why every time a movement is launched to recognize rights for the rightless, like the abolitionists did and the suffragists did, the movements and the people involved are deemed treasonous and radical. Stone writes, quote, "The fact is that each time there is a movement to confer rights onto some new entity, the proposal is bound to sound odd or frightening or laughable. This is partly because until the rightless thing receives its rights, we cannot see it as anything but a thing for the use of us. Us being, of course, those of us who hold rights." End quote. The people in the communities we work with recognize that the structure of law was never intended to protect the environment, but instead to regulate its exploitation, and that they must write new structures of law, maybe writing their own constitutions, to replace it. These are not people who call themselves activists, or for that matter, environmentalists, but they recognize that in order to change the existing structure of law, a movement for nature's rights is necessary. And it's time we heard their voices and joined their cause. The Lorax asked, "Who speaks for the trees?" The people of Ecuador, Blaine, Arnstead, Nottingham, and a dozen other communities have answered, "We do." And now I ask all of you, will you speak for the trees?
When was that?
A couple of years ago. It's not current. It's not as current as just, yeah. I'm going to pass out these booklets. I didn't tell you about them. I called up the Pioneers organization and asked if we could get, and you can each have one.
No, we save papers.
Oh, save
but
paper.
not directions.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we like trees.
Okay, I know. I was surprised they did some. So,
Wow.
it's a beautiful book, but it also, it tells about, I'm just trying to see, okay, page 5. In page 5, all the different tribes, I think I want to say this too. I think it's really a beautiful way to go about trying to save nature and to preserve it and to respect it by supporting indigenous cultures that that's their whole premise. Their ideology, their religion, their language is to protect nature. And so starting at the roots of our land, from the people who, like the Menominee Indian tribe in Wisconsin, they're trying to secure the highest protections for the river. And the Ponca Nation, they're trying to do clean water for their, at a habitat, oh wait a minute, I need my glasses, sorry. The law also establishes the right to clean water, clean air, a habitable climate, and the right to be free from contamination, pollution, and toxic or radioactive waste. The White Earth Ojibwe, this is really interesting. I heard one of the representatives from the Chippewa Nation speak about rice, which they call manumin, But they started with something small, just to see if they could get rights to protect their rice, which meant water and air had to be clean in order for their lands to be clean, for their rice to be good food for them. And there's so many different things in here that you can look into and read about and maybe be inspired by. I'm hoping you will be inspired by this.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
This photo on the front is taken by Cara Romero. who
Really?
Yes, who is the first picture on the inside. She's an amazing artist, and the Hood has a huge exhibit of her work right now.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's
You know that?
fantastic.
It was, yeah, she's a
Oh, you saw- she's-
photographer and a painter, and she's gone through all sorts of ways of reclaiming kind of parts of modern culture, and she also goes into the future. She has a whole room of things like the coyote, who's usually a boy, but it's a girl, and she's got why can't I think of words right now? One of those space, the round ones.
Oh,
Yeah, along with devil's claw in a bowl, and there are always these whole stories that go along with it.
wow.
And the paintings were amazing, and she did paintings of other artists, so
Well, they're
like,
paintings or photographs, sorry?
they're both.
She does both things.
She does both. And the paint, like she had paintings of Potter, who was actually covered in clay, that then had native patterns on it, and then she was modeling, and they're phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
You have to go. There's also one of someone covered in rice powder, and representing like spring, dawn, sunrise. It's phenomenal.
Oh, it sounds
Go,
incredible.
go.
Thank you. This
Yes.
is great. I love the connection of
Yeah.
it ties everything in.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, and her daughter is a model for a lot of the photographs over time.
Oh, since she was younger and then to
Yeah,
now.
she, from maybe 6
Wow,
to 20 within the show.
how
Yeah, it's-
beautiful.
It's an amazing show.
It's gonna be showing through August 10th.
Thank
So
you.
awesome.
Okay, that's a field trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great to see.
yeah, it's called Living Life.
Living life?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the English name.
So as we're kind of closing down a little bit, will you speak for the trees? The water, the mountains, air, and all beings? It's a question I wanted to repeat. Daniel Vogel was another speaker for the University of Oregon's Spring Creek Nature Writing workshops, and that line in itself spoke to me so strongly, especially in the realm of what we just talked about today. And I asked this: does writing as ceremony awaken us to knowing ourselves in relationship to our art? Move us towards the sacred act of defending and giving voice to nature? Is it an attitude? A deep tuning into our inner voices and experiences? How do we show up to write? Do we sit with intention? Allow the deepest part of ourselves to listen, to speak, to be a spokesperson? Robin Wall Kimmerer says writing is an act of reciprocity, to share with others what plants and animals have shared with me. What is the role of the nature writer? To illuminate the stories of beings, to celebrate the living world, to to foster kinship, to incite wonder, to nurture ecological compassion, to make justice, to sound the alarm, to rally defense. We as writers have a responsibility. It's about remembering and using our voices. Knowing that people are not changed by information. That poetry touches the heart and soul as we express feelings. That's where our role comes in. And what does that look like? How immersed in nature are we? What stories do we already have? What stories must we set out to find? How will we write about them? Will we use lost or new words? Will we use renewal pronouns? Will we speak through the voice of nature beings? Is the act of interweaving our lives deeply with nature and writing the stories we live as ritual what changes us? Is this what we can offer the world? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie.